Hello and welcome. My name is Rick Roller, and with me tonight is the proprietor of our school, Mr. Danny Naylor, who will be doing the technical back end and maybe chiming in once in a while if I beg him to. Tonight, I'll be your game show host as we go through real estate settlement questions. Now, this is what you work for. You work to get people to come to one of these settlements because you're getting really close to getting them the house they've always dreamed of, or at least the investment property they always wanted, or the vacant lot that they think is going to be a great investment, whatever it is. Uh, and you're getting close to, making a commission too. So I love working on settlements, and I don't think you ought to just sit there eating a cookie and not knowing what's going on. I mean, the best thing for you to do, quite frankly, when you're absolutely brand new, is to take a senior agent from your company or your sales manager or your broker with you, at least for your first closing anyway, and then have them get there early and have them go over the settlement sheets with you. And then take a stab at it if you think you're up to it. And if not, the lender will come in and do it, for you if you want them to. But I usually do the settlement sheets on all of my closings. My lenders know that, that I'll be explaining the actual debits and credits. But but they're actually paid to close that loan, and they're not going to let you close the loan for them. So anyway, but I love closings. Everyone seems to be upbeat and happy, and this is really a great time. So we have a number of questions that we're going to go through, and they're all based on the closing disclosure form. And when you go take your actual physical exam, they will give you a a closing disclosure actually to work from. So it now don't freak out on me, okay? You're not going to have to take your calculator and figure out all these numbers. That's already on the form. So you're not going to have to calculate amortization and that sort of thing. Um, when you're a broker, you're going to have to do a little of that if you're going to take the broker's exam. But on the salesman level, you don't have to do that. But you will have one of these closing disclosure. It's all filled out, so it's kind of like a crib sheet. It's got the answer on it already. But what it really is, are you familiar with the closing disclosure sheets? Okay, and we have several of them that you can see in your manual, and I hope you bought one, and also in some of the other material that we'll be giving you here at the Institute of Real Estate Education. So you need to learn these, and I know your first one or two, you're not going to be totally, cognizant of everything, but if you can't go over the figures with your sales manager or your broker prior to the closing, at least take the documents to them after the closing, because you have to turn them into the office anyway, and have them go over them with you after the closing, because you will have sat through the closing once, and then you will sit through it again with your broker, and after you do, well, probably three or four of these, you'll be at a point where you can explain most of it. Okay, and remember, the title officer or the lender that's there closing this loan, they're not going to let you get embarrassed in front of your clients. I mean, if they see you struggling, they're going to jump in. Well, let me explain that, because I was the one that prepared this paperwork, or I this is actually my job to explain this, and they'll jump in and save you. But and you can just eat your cookie and it'll be fine. But I really think you need to be sharp on settlements, and it'll take some time. And the big payoff is when you find a mistake. Okay. Typical mistakes are things like nobody told the title officers and the lenders that the house was actually rented, and the tenant's going to stay there for another month or so, to get all their stuff together, as they get out, or the owners, and then you've got some tenants coming in, they're going to follow up those owners, they're getting out of this duplex and buying a single family. There are lots of different kinds of scenarios. But or maybe it is a single family that's also rented. I don't know. But No one's going to let you fall between the cracks. But as soon as you can get up to speed on understanding the settlement documents, I want you there. And I want you to be a true professional. So we have a number of questions we're going to go over, but the first thing we're going to go over is this closing disclosure. So let's get yours out. It might be on screen, or maybe you've actually printed a copy. I would like you to print a copy so you can kind of highlight some things. And even if you have to come back and go through this uh, class again, that that's okay too. All right, so here's the first page of this closing disclosure, and this has a lot of valuable information in it. And like I said, you're not going to have to calculate this. You're just going to have to be able to find it. Like they might say, we have a question where it says, "What will the monthly principal and interest be?" Well, look, loan terms. It says closing disclosure. Then underneath that, there's this dark black line, and it says loan terms. And then underneath that, three lines or three slots down, it has the month of the monthly principal and interest right there. So, that's what it'll be. It'll say, how much will the monthly principal and interest payment be? Now they're not going to say, go look on page one in the first section. They're not going to do that. You're supposed to know where those are, and if you don't, that's okay. You don't know them all. You can flip through them real quickly. At least they're heavily, in black, with a contrasting white type, and so they kind of stick out at you. Okay. So, that's how that works. And so there's a number of different pages. In each page has different information on it. And as we go through the questions, we'll look at each one of these pages. All right. So let's look at page 2 briefly. Okay. Okay, now page 2, once again, you've got your loan costs, and then you have other costs. Well, what do you mean other costs? Well, like homeowners insurance and taxes and other government type fees that, might be involved in this particular uh, transaction. You can also find under other, under H, which is near the bottom of this sheet, um, things where the HOA fees are charged. And that's a very common thing. And sometimes these HOAs could be very expensive. In fact, there's several properties in the Salt Lake County area where there's actually two HOAs. There's the overall developer HOA, and then there's a condominium HOA as well. And I've had several closings where we had to get information on two different HOAs, and sometimes they have some fees like a transfer fee and whatnot that come from outer space. You need to know all this if you're selling a condo or a townhouse. You need to let your buyers know that, my goodness, folks, in this particular situation, this townhouse is actually in two different HOAs. You've got an HOA for the overall development, and then you've got an HOA for this particular townhouse development that's in the overall development. So there's going to be two transfer fees. One of them is going to be $750. The other one's going to be $950, and there's going to be two monthly fees, and together they should total about this amount much. Now they should have all that information before they even make the offer, so they know what they're getting into. But you need to remind them. Let's look at page 3, please, real quick. Remember, this is exciting stuff. You're getting really close to getting one done. Okay. All right. Well, in this one, we've got calculating cash to close at the very top, and then underneath that, the summary of the transaction. So if you see a question and says, well, what was the sales price? Well, it's right here under summary of the transaction. And were there HOA dues? Well, down a little further in that same area under K, it shows that there's some HOA dues, and they were actually prorated for the month of closing. And then you have things that have already been paid, like their deposit, their earnest money deposit, $10,000, and they're getting a loan for 162, and seller is giving them a credit for $2,500. Maybe that was to help defray some of the lending costs. I don't know. But that's probably where it is. Was because that's in the section it's in. And you'll notice too that this form, as we're looking at page 2, or actually we're looking at page 3, that on the left-hand side, there's look right under where it says summaries of transactions, that big black the second one down. Okay, and underneath that it says borrower's transaction, but then look over just a little bit to the right and it says seller's transaction. And that will be common where on this one page, if you want to know about the cost of borrowing or the amount of money the seller has to pay at closing, there's going to be a borrower side and a seller side, and you can kind of work down through that. And really, what this amounts to is you're going to have to become familiar with one of these so it takes you less time to find the answer. The answer will be here. You just have to find it. So we have some samples that you can read through and become a little bit more familiar with them. I don't want you walking into the exam and you've never really spent any quality time with one of these sets of documents, okay? And then the very last page, you've got your, uh, where they actually sign their application, and you've got information on all the brokerages and who their settlement agents are and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, we're going to go through that as we go through the questions that we have for you tonight. Let's go ahead and get started with the very first question, which is, what is the interest rate of the mortgage loan that the borrower is assuming? Now, assuming a loan could be a really good thing. We see them a lot in situations where this is not their first home, or in a situation where it is their first home and they have a lot of money, which most buyers don't, but some do. And some get help from parents or grandma and grandpa, or some people are buying a subsequent house and they've sold some of their investment properties, cashed out of their Bitcoin, and, and they're putting down a couple hundred grand. This is all great, okay? But this is a very common question, and they just want to know, what's the interest rate? 3.88, 3.50, 4.17, or 4.50. Well, we need to know where to find that, okay? So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to flip back to the settlement documents, and you see where it says closing disclosure right up there? Well, right up there, it says the seller, the price, and it's got its conventional loan. And as you look down at the loan terms, it's got the amount of the loan is going to be 162. But the question they ask is, well, what was the interest rate? Well, there it is, in that second line, right in the loan terms. Which Dan has put yellow around, just so you can see how, where it is. And they're paying 3.875, and that's probably the nominal rate. There's also going to be another disclosure and another rate, which which is called the annual percentage rate, the APR. And annual percentage rates take into consideration all the different expenses it took to get the loan, like loan origination fees and that type of thing, if there's a discount point or whatever that was paid. And that has to be calculated into the APR, the annual percentage rate. But that's not the nominal rate. The nominal rate, or the interest rate, was 3.875. Now, if you see a question and they want to know, well, was there a difference between the APR and the nominal rate of the loan? The rule is that the APR will always be the same as the interest rate or higher than. Well, why would it be higher than the interest rate? Because it takes into consideration costs that were paid at the front end of the loan, maybe a loan origination fee or a interest rate buy down fee or something. It takes all that into consideration and does an overall calculation that they come up with the annual percentage rate. It's really just kind of a shopping thing, because one guy might say, well, man, you ought to come borrow from me because I have a 5.5% loan. It's fantastic. Wow, that sounds like a great rate. But you get there and they're charging you 4 or 5 discount points to get to that rate. And so you need to shop the APR, because the APR takes into consideration all the costs to put that loan together. And so, it may be 6 or 6.5, and that's really the true cost. It's just that you're paying a lot of that up front, so you don't feel the bite every single month in your monthly payment and whatnot, which might be a good thing. I don't know. You need a good lender. You need a good lender because they keep apprised of all the not only all the new underwriting rules and how they're changing, and how maybe they're softening in this area, but they're getting harder in this area, but it also different loan programs. I mean, you have FHAs, you have VAs, you have conventional, you have Utah Housing Authority, and then you have some other oddball stuff. So yeah, the state of Utah, has a Utah housing loan program. I mean, there's all kinds of loans out there. So having a great lender that would set your buyer down and really have a great interview with them and say, "Oh, this is your first home? Okay, that makes a difference." Okay. It's a subsequent home, well, then you wouldn't qualify for this first time buyer program that we had. I mean, they need to interview your people and find out where they're coming from, and then they can help them find the best loan. Okay. Um, but you need a good lender that has lots of different loan programs because, if people don't have the money, they can't buy the house. Okay. And some buyers, occasionally you'll have some cash buyers, but, that's not going to be the norm. The norm's going to be people are actually borrowing money to get into their homes. Okay. So that's page one. And that was question one, 3.88.
Welcome, we're so glad to see you. We want to help as many people as possible to get started in their real estate career. If you like what you see in these videos, be sure to show our instructors that you appreciate them by giving them a like. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss a single one of our topics, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Guess what? We have helped more students successfully start their real estate career than any other school that we have stats for. If you want to get in on that action, go to the description, click on the Prep My Exam link. We have audio reviews, we have thousands of practice questions, we've got an exam simulator, and we've got a little secret surprise that might be your golden ticket to starting your real estate career right. So go ahead and click the link, and we'll see you there.
What is a prepayment penalty on the mortgage loan? Is it up to 761.78? There is no prepayment penalty. Is it over $9,000? Is it over $3,000? Well, I mean, let's look at our sheets again. Okay. Now, looking at loan terms again, and this is the first page again. So you see where it says loan terms. It's the first black line. Underneath that, there's a column, and it says prepayment penalty. Well, that would be a great place to look. And even on the settlement sheet, or not, or at least on the disclosure sheet, it says, does the loan have these features? A prepayment penalty. And the answer is yes, as high as $3,200 if you pay that loan off during the first 2 years. The prepayment penalty is it's additional interest the lender wants. Putting these loans together can be expensive. They have to pay a loan origination fee to a lender that works for them or works with them in putting these loans together, and underwriter fees and everything else. And then they sell them, and sometimes there's some guarantees on the sale too. So it's they want you to keep that loan out for a little bit, and really the statistics on this are very interesting. You could talk to a lender, and they usually know. I mean, how quick are loans that have been originated recently? How quick do they pay off? Sometimes people live in a house for 2 years and then they sell it and the buyer gets a different loan. Well, that one only lasted 2 years. Okay. In this one, there was a prepayment penalty, right? And it could be as high as $3,240 if you pay the loan off during the first 2 years. Okay. So that would be interesting to know. So if I were out listing a property and they've only lived there, a year and a half, I'd say, well, did the loan you have that you got, did it have a prepayment penalty? Well, they're not going to remember or know, and unless they're really, really sharp, and maybe they've owned several houses before. But hopefully they kept all the loan documents, and if they didn't, you can go talk to the lender, and you'll have to have them, of course, sign a listing agreement with you. And there's language in the listing agreement that you might have to give to the lender a copy of the listing, because there's a paragraph in there that gives that lender authorization from the buyers, the people on the existing loan, and not, they were buyers, but now they're sellers. Okay. But they were borrowers on that existing loan. And they have to, I mean, they just can't. Some of this is in the public record. I mean, the trust deed is recorded, and it has some of the information in there. They generally do not record the notes, but they do record the trust deeds, and a lot of the loan information is in there. but not everything. And so it's generally speaking, we don't do a lot of this type of work. The title company is the one that goes in and does all the prorations and does all the settlement documents. And then the borrower is going to have their own lender usually. Sometimes they pay cash, but not always. And so that new lender is going to want to make sure that your title company is okay with them, and they're okay with your title company. I mean, sometimes they have title companies they've had bad experiences with, and they don't want to close with them again. But it's a very, very rare. But it would be something you should check out right away. See, a lot of these borrowers, hopefully, they've been pre-qualified. If they're your borrowers that you're working, your buyers you're working with, then you're going to have a pretty good handle on what their qualifications are. And once they decide they want to make an offer on this home, you might want to have a quick review with that lender, because you're going to want a pre-qualified letter, a pre-approval letter from that lender, um, that would go with your offer to show that not only, yes, they're getting a loan, but as you can see, we're already down the road quite a ways on that, and they've already been pre-approved. But there's a prepayment penalty in this one, okay? And so we're on the next question, which is number 2, what is the prepayment penalty? And as you can see from the document here, uh, right in that first page again, that it could be as high as $3,200, $3,240. Depending on when it was during that 2-year period. Generally speaking, as you're towards the back end of that prepayment penalty window, it goes down and down and down until after the 25th month, perhaps on this particular loan, because there was a 2-year prepayment penalty. There's probably no prepayment penalty at all at that point. But this is all good information that you ought to get. How are you going to gather all of it? Well, you're going to ask the borrower, or you're going to ask your seller to get all their information on that original loan. And then if they don't have it, or they've lived there a long time, or even a short time, but they've lost those documents or whatever, then you've got to work with the existing lender and pull all that together. And I would have your title company do that. They're going to handle that communication with that lender anyway, and get the deed of reconveyance is what we call it. That's the document that actually proves that loan has been paid off. Okay, let's go to number 3, please. And I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you. It's okay, guys. I mean, you can sit there your first 2 or 3 closings and just eat a cookie and not say anything. But hey, don't go much further than that. I mean, come on. I mean, if you want to be a real pro, you need to understand these settlement statements. So what I would do is try to get everything pulled together. Let's say you're having a settlement that's going to close on Tuesday. Try to have your title company get everything done and together, so that Tuesday morning before you go to the settlement, you show up a little early and have them go through the figures with you individually. And hopefully that'll work, for your first few. Sometimes, I mean, the borrower's lenders are dragging their feet so much that, I mean, you were supposed to close at 10:30, so you showed up with the borrowers and you're sitting there eating cookies till about 11 o'clock because they haven't got the paperwork finished. And that's probably not the title company's fault. It's probably the lender's fault, because they didn't send the information over to the title company quickly enough, to meet that 10:30 appointment. But it's okay. Just keep feeding your borrowers cookies and Coca-Cola, and they'll be fine. Okay, let's go to number. Oh, wait a minute here. How many years would the borrower have to pay the mortgage insurance? Okay, cool. Let's go back to that agreement again. And we're still on the first page. And guess what? Highlight it, please. There you go. As you go down there, it says projected payments. And it shows you on there that in years 1 through 7 in gray, that's at the top of the yellow box there. Uh, there's going to be a prepayment penalty. But if you look at the mortgage insurance drops off after the 7th year. As you look at years 8 through 30, there's just a line there that's already paid off. That means that they're going to pay um, mortgage insurance for 7 years because they didn't have 20% down. If you have 20% down, they're not going to charge you mortgage insurance. If it's FHA, yeah, they will always. If it is a VA, they kind of bury it in the loan, but it's not really upfront and in your face. Let's go to our next question, please. Number 3, how many years will the borrower have to pay? That's 7 years, which we already been beating to death. Okay. But that's right on look, you're going to be given one of these. It's like a crib sheet. Okay. It's got all the answers to answer probably about 8 questions. Okay. So don't fear this thing. They're giving you the answers. That's nice. What you need to know is you need to be a little bit familiar with where the things are in settlement document. Okay. All right. What is the term of the mortgage? Well, looking at our sheet here, oh my gosh, what is it? We'll look up there in the top corner that Dan has highlighted, and it says the loan term is 30 years. First line. Okay. Now, the reason I want you to be a little bit familiar with these, I mean, you can walk in cold, but it's going to eat up time. The more familiar you are with this, it'll take you like 6 seconds to find the answer than 2 or 3 or 4 minutes. And I don't want you to spend a lot of time on these questions when the answers are right on those, in that agreement. So let's look at number 5, please.
Hey Rick, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So when it says about the loan information where it says product, it says fixed rate.
Mm-hmm.
So they just have the certain rate.
Well, it could have been an APR. That stands for annual percentage rate, and this one is a fixed annual percentage rate. But sometimes you have loans where it's a variable interest rate. So it's, every year they'll have a day of reckoning usually, and depending on what the economy's done, if it's been up, your interest rate's going to go up. If it's been down, your interest rate's going to go down. So there are loans where the interest rates are either agreed to in advance, that there is a rising schedule, and so let's say interest rates are currently 6, but that's a little tight for your borrower to qualify. So he might want to get a loan where that kind of steps up in interest. So maybe the first year it starts out at 5, and then it goes to 6, and then the third year it might go to 6.75 or 7%. So it's an escalating interest rate, but they're going to qualify them either on that first year or the second year. But it helps people squeeze into homes they can't afford, and hopefully they get raises. Okay, go ahead.
And that's when the 2007, 2008, what's it called? Economic crash, right?
Yeah.
There was too many people that had that variable.
I think the main reason that we had problems back then is not so much that the loans substantially went up, because they, I mean, on a graduated payment type plan, yeah, we had a few of those. The main thing was people just lost their jobs, so they had no income, and so it wasn't the fact that, because some of those loans were like 4%, 4.5. That's pretty. You're not gonna get much lower than that, and so but I mean, it doesn't matter what your interest rate is. If you got canned and you can't find another job, you're going to be sweating bullets, or begging the family to help you out and make payments for 6 months by trying to get a new job or something. So.
And then when you're able, I mean, if you refinance, you can change the loan type, right?
You can, when you refinance, you can refinance for a totally different loan. For example, maybe when you first went into this property, you had VA eligibility and you did a VA loan. But you've been there now for 6, 7 years and you want to refinance, interest rates have come down, whatever. You want to pull cash out to go buy an additional property. That's all fine, but you might choose because you're not going to sell that other property. You already have your eligibility tied up into that one. So maybe your next one, you might go FHA, or you might just go conventional. you know, having several loans on several different properties doesn't lock you into, well, you can only get this kind of loan. Okay, that's looked at each individual application and at the time you're applying. And so, okay. And it's,
Perfect. Thank you.
yeah. Well, thanks for the questions. I appreciate it. And having a good lender partner is really, really important. You know, there's a lot of good ones around. I mean, and there's a lot of different kinds of them. Most of the lenders we work with in our industry are going to be mortgage brokers. Okay. Meaning they don't lend out their own money, but they kind of work as an intermediary. You know, so you're working with a company and, you know, they're called sweetheart loans. And you know, they're probably a mortgage broker, you know, where they'll put it together and then they sell it to a larger lender like Security National, you know, or Fidelity or somebody like that. So, um, but you need a good lender. You need a good lender because there's so many different programs and they keep changing them. And some programs, particularly the ones done from the state of Utah. I mean, the state of Utah gets real aggressive every once in a while, particularly in helping people get into first time buyer type programs. And when those are funded, you know, they fund it in pieces. And so, you know, they may have enough money where you can do 22 loans, you know, but that's going to be eaten up by realtors and lenders all over the state, you know. And so you need a good lender that keeps track of things. Maybe they have enough horsepower with their company that they can get some funds allocated to them that they could use just for their company. You know, there's there's dozens of different loan programs out there, and you know, sometimes they have real special ones that, you know, that they even have. If you're getting Utah housing type money, a lot of times they subsidize your interest payment, and it's just amazing. Well, you know what is available to help people get into homes. Selling homes makes better commissions for all of us, but it also makes the world go around, and people, you know, are really interested in getting into home ownership. We're on number 5 now. What section discloses the commissions paid to the agents in a transaction? Is it H, F, C, or B? Well, if you're looking at let's pull up our document, please, our closing disclosure. Okay, so where's it going to have? You know, we want to know what the commissions are, right? We're on number 5, right? Well, there they are. You see, they're at the bottom of the page. Which page is this? This is what's the page on the bottom there, Dan?
2.
Oh, you can see that? Great. Okay, that's page 2.
H2.
Page 2, and out of 5, and you'll see it's highlighted there towards the bottom, and it shows, you know, under H, 02 and I mean 05 and 06 are the real estate commissions, and even has them broken out to each company. $5,700 for the listing company and $5,700 for the one working with the buyer, I guess, whichever one that it was. Okay, that's where you find that. So as you can see, this is not a, oh gosh, I've got to have my calculator ready and calculate something. It's not that kind of a test. You know, these questions are already pre-calculated. You just have to know where to find them. Okay, let's go to number 6, please. Number 6 says, if the buyer wanted to know how much the actual loan origination fee was, you know, that she's being charged, what section would she look under? Well, gosh, this kind of gives it away when you look down there at C and it says, what kind of charge? Origination charge. Well, what did she want to know? Well, how much origination fee am I paying? So, you know, I don't know. You think that's the answer? Okay. We'll look up at the top of this page, and it is loan cost. And that's on page 2. And there she rolls. I mean, you know, there it is. Okay. You've got your application fee, your underwriting fee, and a quarter of a point for discount points. So the total is, you know, $1,802. But so depending on question was phrased, it was says, okay, we did that one, number 6. We want to know how much the actual loan origination fee was, and you'll find it under the section that you know the line item, which, well, it's under under loan costs. It's the origination charges. Okay. See, if you read through this thing a couple of times, then you hopefully you kind of know where it was. So I think that was in the front, or I think it's in the back, and then it can help you find it easier. Okay, tripping along to number 7, we find, according to the closing disclosures example, who paid the transfer tax. Now, a transfer tax is a small tax. Um, it doesn't really raise that much revenue. What it really does is the assessor's office um, is charged with taxing all these properties according to their current fair market value. And so the way they do that is they have people on staff that track sales. And so if properties were at one time selling for $250,000, or a condo was, but now they're selling for $350,000 because it's like 4 years later or something, or more or less, whatever. And then in order to find out what those fees are, I mean, they're going to be on the settlement statements, right? But small fees, individual fees like transfer taxes, historically, either one person pays it or another does. So let's go to the settlement sheets. And this is going to be under our loan cost area on this page. Well, it's going to be other cost. And as you can see, that Dan has highlighted section E, which has a transfer tax. And look, you scan your eyes down that line on the transfer tax, and you'll see that the transfer tax was let me see, taxes on government fees, recording fees. Okay, transfer tax was looks like $950. And who paid it? Well, whose column is it in? Look at the top. It's in the seller's column. Now, there is another fee also here that was, if you look at that one, $85, and that was a recording fee. And who paid that? Well, look, run your eyes to the top, and you'll see that the borrower paid that one too. So the seller paid the transfer tax fee in this, and can the buyer pay that? Well, maybe. I mean, this is in the contract, in the offer. So the offer was made, and the seller agreed to pay the transfer fee. Okay, I mean, somebody's got to pay it. What you don't want to do is have the agent pay it. Have the buyer, the seller pay it, because that's, I don't know. Should the seller pay it? Yeah, there's a good argument for that. Should the buyer pay it? Yeah, there's a good argument for that too. So it's a negotiated item, but it's going to be in your offer. Okay, we're on number 8 now. Okay, we're talking about a credit report of the borrower. Are you going to pay it at closing or before closing? Well, how do we know? Well, let's look at the once again on page 2. We're looking at loan cost, and we are talking about what kind of fee again? You remember? Well, looking back at our question, it is the credit report. Okay. And so we want to know, was it paid before or after the closing? All right. So look at your loan costs, and look under the second section there. It says services borrower did not shop for, and it says credit report fee, and it was, looks like appraisal was $405, about $30, $29.80, which may be a little light these days, but that's okay. This is just examples. Okay, there it is. Oh, and then there was another part of that too, $28.80. That was paid for before the closing, and then at the closing, there's some additional monies that were paid, like the flood determination fee to see if it's in a flood zone, the flood monitoring fee, tax monitoring fee, and then a tax status research fee. Those are usually one-time fees. Okay. Number 8, will the credit report for the borrower be paid? Yeah, before closing. Okay. Usually it's paid at application time. You know, not every application leads to a closed deal. You know, sometimes they just don't qualify. Sometimes they get an inspection and they find out some things about the house that for them it you know makes it undesirable and they cancel that deal. Um, then a lot of times, you know, other things might happen. You know, they started to buy this house, you know, because they thought it would save their marriage, and then sometime during the process, they decided that it's not going to save their marriage. It's just the same old person in different circumstances, a different domicile. And it's not going to work. So anyway, there are a lot of things that could happen, but you know that's they want that money up front because you know that's something that's an expense they don't want to pay if the deal doesn't close. Okay, usually the borrower pays it. Okay, number 9. What is the tolerance for cost to increase for title insurance where the lender allows the borrower to pick a provider from a list of companies that they provide? Zero tolerance. I mean, that's if you know. Well, it's going to cost you $950, and they get the closing, and it's $1,250. You know, unlimited tolerance. The lender pays this fee or 10% tolerance. Okay. Well, guys, if you look at this, it
This is
we're
one where the answer is not on the form. It's just something that you need to know.
yeah, and it's the tolerance is 10%, guys. So you know it's so if they quote you a price and then you get to the closing and it's 12% more than than what they said it would be, you know, well, I don't know, prices just went up. Sorry, or we had to take it to a different lender that charged more money for different things, so it's going to be this. Well, what happens? Well, then yeah, well, we have another question that we kind of look at that. Actually, it's just right here somewhere. Oh, let's look at number 10 now. What is the total amount the borrower owes at closing according to the closing disclosure sample? Okay, so the total amount is going to be in like towards the bottom line, huh? Okay, so you see we have this highlight at the bottom of the page, and it says total other cost and total closing cost. Okay, well, what did our question want to know? I mean, it wanted to know what is the total amount the borrower owes at closing. Okay, and that would be with their down payment and all the cost of the loan is. So we're looking at this and total closing cost. It's right down there, and you might have to. So which answer is that? Which we're on number 10. What's the total amount? 14,100 and no 189. Oh yeah, that's because it has everything. Where is that on the form, Dan? 189,762. It's right there at the bottom. And that is on page 3. Okay. So at the very bottom on page 3, what's highlighted now, it shows you that total amount to buy the house was 189,762.30, but you're going to get a loan and some other things, and they paid some money up front. So how much do they have to bring into the closing? 14,176 and change. Okay, that's what they got to do to pay to get into this little condo or whatever it is. Maybe it's a lot. I don't know. Probably not a house, but it might be certain areas. Okay, questions. Anyone have any questions at this point? Now, are you going to have to calculate any of these things? No, you're just going to have to find them. Okay, and practice, practice, practice. because once you get used to locating these, after you've done about 3 or 4, you should be just fine. Okay. We have plenty of them to work on too. Number 11. What would happen if the closing costs change too much from the loan estimate in closing? Closing costs must be moved to a later, the closing must be moved to a different date. The borrower must ask for additional concessions from the seller. Be nice, they pay it. The loan amount must be charged to compensate for the difference. Changed to compensate for the difference, or the lender must refund all monies that were charged above the allowed limits. What do you think would be most fair, guys? Well, gosh, it's got to be D. Now, they still want to buy the house, but the cost went up for one reason or another. Well, the lender's got to refund all the funds that were charged above the allowed limits. Once they give you that final estimate on closing, something happens. You're either not going to get the loan at all because the interest rate wasn't locked in and it surged ahead. You're not going to get 5.5. They want 6.7 now, and maybe you don't even qualify. Okay, that's one of the reasons to have a great lender. Okay, because they will lock the loan. They'll call you. They say, "Look, things are looking really dicey. I think we better lock this interest rate. We better lock the loan." And you can lock the loan, assuming there's, I mean, you don't have an extensive amount of time before you close, but you can lock a loan if it's going to close up, fairly quickly. And all this is negotiable, and the lender will have different attitudes about that. Let's look at number 12. Number 12 says, on which lines of this closing disclosure would you most likely find unpaid taxes by the seller that are being credited to the buyer? Okay. Now, in our state, taxes are paid in arrears. Okay, we're at the end of this year, and probably the taxes have already been paid because we're in December. Usually, they're paid right at the end of November or very first of December. Well, in that case, then the buyer's paid his share of the taxes. I mean, if you had a deal closing December 5th, okay, then the seller should pay all the taxes on that property for the current year up through the 5th, okay, 5 days in December. And they probably already paid the whole tax, because it was, they paid them usually at the end of November. And they don't pay them really. The lenders pay them. They collect with PITI payment in most cases. And then the lenders have staffs that, they're going to keep that money in a special account. They're not going to pay interest on it, probably. And then what's going to happen is they're going to make sure the taxes are paid. Now, why are they so, careful about that? Well, they want to be first in line. They want to have a first mortgage. Unfortunately for the lender, and all lenders have the same problem, is that underneath under the dirt, is the property tax. Okay. So they say, well, I have a first mortgage loan. That's true, but the taxes are really in front of them. Really, they're second position behind the state property taxes. That's one of the reasons why they collect on monthly and then escrow that money so they keep it so that, when it needs to be paid, they can pay it. And it's not going to jeopardize their lending condition because if they don't, their lending position, because if they don't pay those property taxes, that property is going to be sold at a tax sale. And the taxes are superior to the lender's loan. So they're not going to let that happen. Worst comes to worst, they would pay the taxes and then start foreclosure against the borrower because they didn't honor their agreement. Unless you go in there and sweet talk them and try to get some sort of forbearance or renegotiate your loan, which is possible too. Okay, so that's where you find it. Let's look at our next question, please. Number 12. That was an easy one, okay, because it gave you the line and everything. Number 13, how does the lender in a closing disclosure handle partial payments? Okay, the lender may hold them in a separate account until the rest of the payment's made. The lender may accept payments that are less than the full amount and apply them to the loan. The lender does not accept late payments. It's not made clear. Okay, well, the correct answer to this one is B. Okay, And if you'll see, as we go through our settlement document again, that Dan has highlighted partial payments. And so you read it and it's checked. May accept payments that are less than the full amount due, partial payments, and apply them to your loan. So it's right there. Okay. I mean, it said partial payments. It shouldn't be too challenging if you knew it was there. Okay. Okay, we're clipping right along, and we only have a couple left, and one is 14. What is the total interest percentage on the closing disclosure example? And our answer to this one is B. And because if you look at page 5 of the settlement document, it's got it right on there. You know, you see where Dan's highlighted the total interest percentage was 69.46 of the loan. Now that's taken into consideration all the payments over 30 years, and they added up all the payments and how much of that went to interest and how much that went to principal. And well, you know, 69,000 bucks went towards interest, but the amount financed was 62,000. So, but that's just taking, you know, if you'd carried the loan all the way through the end and whatnot. Most people don't. I mean, most people don't. You know, they buy a house, they get a 15 or a 30-year mortgage, but they don't live there that long. They might only live 5, 6 years, 7 years. Who knows? Okay. If they're going to live there a long time, though, I would admonish them to try to get a 15-year loan because it's going to build their equity up so much quicker. You know, my stepdad, he bought a house in Fort Collins one time, and we had a long discussion. You know, he's a very astute individual, and was an appraiser actually for the federal government. But he elected to go on the 30-year AM rather than the 15. He lived there about, well, gosh, it was almost 12 years. And so, you know, when he went to sell the house, the market had actually receded. I mean, real estate doesn't always go up. Sometimes you're in a soft market and the price just kind of came down. The price actually came down to what he'd paid for it a few years prior. So he bought it for a price and he sold it for the same price. So didn't make a lot of money on that one, but there was a little bit of loan retirement because, you know, the principal was paid off a little quicker because it was a 15-year AM on the loan instead of a 30. Okay. His payments were higher, but, you know, he could afford it, you know, so that's what he did. If you can pay off your loan early, if you could pay your house off early, that'd be a really cool thing. A lot of people say, oh, no, leverage your house and, you know, use that money instead of paying off the house to, you know, go buy other houses. And then after you own a half dozen houses, then, you know, for a few years and sell one or two of them and take your equity, then pay your loan off. And you can do that too. You know, I think it's cool to have your house paid off.
Rick?
Yeah.
So with building equity, it means you've paid more amount of your loan. You're not too much in debt with it.
No, build it well. Loans are fully amortized loans or partially amortized loans. And now what that means is if you have 360 if it's a 30-year loan, or 180 if it's a, you know, 15-year loan, that's a number of months, right? So let's just take a 30-year loan. That's 360 months. And if you made a payment of $1,200 a month, part of that payment, most of it in the front part of the loan, goes to interest because the loan amount's higher. And then a little bit goes against the principal. Okay. And so as you pay these payments, that the payment stays the same over the life of the loan, but the allocation of that payment, with each payment, the principal interest goes down a little bit. And so if you keep it for the full term of the loan, about midway through the loan, you're starting to pay more principal out of your monthly payment and less interest. And so, you know, that amortization rolls into your favor just over time. You know, because you're paying a little bit of the principal amount of the loan off every single month, and after a while, and your payment stays the same, well, your loan balance drops. And so they figure that next payment based on what the current loan balance was. So even if you only paid it off 30 or 40 or $50, that just means that's your payment will remain the same, but the percentage of the payment that goes towards principal reduction increases with each payment. And the interest amount you're paying on that loan decreases with each payment. It's because it's an amortized loan. The payment stays the same, but the appropriation of that amount of payment, part of it goes to principal reduction and part of it goes to the interest you're paying on the loan. And then most loans, that would be a PI or principal and interest loan. But most loans are PITI, and the TI stands for taxes and insurance. So that $1,200 will probably be more like a $1,500 or $1,600 payment, because in addition to paying the principal and interest on the loan, you're going to be paying some monies that are going to be put into escrow accounts to pay for the taxes in November of each year, and also that's going to buy next year's fire insurance policy. Okay. And you don't
But you start building equity. How do you
Right.
start building equity? By paying as much
Next
of the loan off?
Well, you could keep paying your payments. Now, if most people are not going to live in a house 15 years, they're not going to live in a house 10 years, most people. So the principal balance is not going to go down that much unless they decide to accelerate that. And one of the ways to do that is, well, you could do a biweekly loan. So what happens in a biweekly loan, there's 52 weeks in a year. So every 2 weeks you make a payment. So you're making at least one and sometimes 1.5, 2 extra house payments each year, because you're paying every 2 weeks. And that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to double your principal amount. Let's say your payment was $1,500 and change. You take off the amount of that $1,500 that was attributed for escrows, the next year's homeowners policy and the property taxes, and maybe that left $1,200 or something. Okay. And then part of that, most of it goes to interest, but maybe $80, $90 of it goes to principal reduction. So some people, you can get an amortization schedule which shows you exactly because that payment will stay the same, unless the taxes and your insurance goes up, and they'll be adjusting for that, usually on an annual basis. But what happens is, as you make those payments, you could look at your amortization schedule and say, okay, this payment I'm going to make on the 1st of December, or I made on the 1st of December, $85 of that, $1,200 payment went to a principal reduction. So what some people do is they double it. They have an amortization schedule. So instead of paying $1,200 and change, they pay $1,200 and change plus another $85. So they're doubling up their principal amount. Okay. And that pays them off pretty quick too. 8 and change years, but sometimes a little faster. But it's if you stuck with that program, it would reduce your principal amount each month. There's ways to accelerate your loan. That's one way. Some people, recommend you don't do that because they want you to leverage. But I think, I've had a lot of conversations with guys, and they say, "Well, how do you keep your wife happy?" I says, "Well, pay off her house." Pay off her house. She likes that. Okay. It gives them a warm and fuzzy feeling. And, if you want to, and then put it into an entity where it can't be taken away from you. If you're driving around in an automobile and that automobile is in your name, or even if it's not, and you hit and hurt somebody, well, then you need to take care of them. But if you have overall liability insurance, the amount of $1 million or whatever, that you can get that kind of insurance, so it'll take care of people that was your fault, you harmed them, but it doesn't mean that you need to best to have that kind of insurance because you don't want to, dig in, even sell your house, to because you hurt them, but still you need to take care of them. So get some general liability policies that would take care of that. And then maybe not even have the house in your name. It's really hard to take something away from you when it's not owned by you. See, you're the one driving around, not seeing that pedestrian who ran out in front of your car, and now, they got an attorney and you lost, and now you got to pay 50 grand in medical expenses and whatnot. Hopefully your insurance will cover that. But if it doesn't, that's going to be on you. And if you don't pay it, they're going to get a judgment and they're going to against you, and that'll be a lien on the house, and they're going to try to garnish your wages, all other kind of nasty things, but that's a whole nother topic for another time. But so let's go to number 15. Okay, which is our last question. What is a total finance charge for the loan at the closing disclosure example? Well, that's cool because it says right on your closing disclosure that it is D, 118, 830 and 27 cents. And that is on page, what is that, 5? What page is that, Dan? The print's too small for me to read it.
Yep, that's page 5.
Yeah, right on page 5, and then you can see where Dan's highlighted that up towards the top. Okay. So once again, you don't have to calculate these things. You only have to what? Be able to read them, and then find the answers on the settlement sheet. Okay. Okay, a little word of wisdom for tonight. Okay, and that is the fellow who gets too big for his shoes is apt to finish up barefoot. Okay, so just remember that we're in a service-oriented business, and we're here to help people, and we're helping people with something that's really important to them in their lives. It's you want to make big money, then do big things for people. Help people in things that are very important to them. Why would a surgeon who spent years mastering their craft, and now you're being sedated and they're going to cut you open and do all kinds of miraculous medical miracles to help you? But we're helping people get in and out of houses. They don't get sedated. Sometimes we wish they would, but we're still there to help them at a very tough time in their life. And it's not going to require 9 years of college and all the other things I have to go through in order to cut people up. Other questions you might have tonight? Hush falls over the crowd. Okay, how are you doing? Are you getting this stuff? Is it?
It's making more sense. I just need to study more of the Utah part.
The Utah laws and whatnot?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the Utah laws is it's a lot of memorization because I mean, how many real estate commissioners are there? You either know there are 5 or you don't. 5. Okay, how many years do they serve? 5 years. Okay. I mean, so there's little mnemonic memory devices you can use, and we help you with those through the class. But Utah law is like it's this, or that, and so you need to know. Is it $50? Is it $150? Is it whatever? So, but that's okay, because if you're studying correctly, you put your time and effort into it. You don't have to know the right answer. You only have to recognize it. It's going to be there. It's going to be one of the 4. And if it stumped you, if there's something that's really bad, I mean, you just look, take your index finger like this, okay? Put it on the computer screen, and rub it back and forth, back and forth, back. And pretty soon you go through A to A through to A through to A through to, one of them is going to be hot because of friction. Okay, and that's right, 25% of the time.
I was too embarrassed to do that last time.
Right. Oh, all right, my friends. You know that you can call us at the school anytime, day or night. But if it's at night, the school's not open. So just call me direct to 801-556-8000. That's 801-556-8000. Operators are standing by.
I have a question before. So there was this question that was talking about the experience points to become a broker, which is 60 points. But it was telling me that they had 40 points in Colorado and 30 points in Utah. So that can still combine together?
You need to get 50% of your points from Utah.
50%. Okay.
At least 50%, yeah.
And it doesn't matter what other states you have gotten the other points?
Well, they don't
Oh.
like North Dakota because it's too cold up there. But other than that,
Yeah, it shouldn't matter as long as it's real licensed activity.
Okay.
the points are attributed, or they're awarded for transactions. You know, so many for a lot, so many for a house, so many for a commercial building, so many for, you know, duplex, fourplex, whatever. And you need to be a little bit familiar with those. You know, I mean, how many points do you get for a fourplex? How many do you get for a house? How many do you get for a lot? They'll probably ask you that.
And there was another question that was talking about.
You have to put in 3 years.
Mhm.
Okay. So what does it work out to, Dan? About 40 or 45 properties over 3 years, something like that. I can't remember exactly.
If you're doing residential, it's only about 24 properties in 3 years, and you'll have enough for a broker's license if you're doing sales.
Yeah. So, you know, if you can't get that many points in 3 years, I mean, you probably had a part-time job because you're not living on real estate commissions either. Okay. Hey, we need good people. So thanks for being here, and we're thrilled that you're here, and you know, don't be a stranger. Call us if you need us, and we'll be there to help. And even after you get your license, if you know, if you can't get a hold of your broker, or you need some help, just, you know, call me. I'll give you my 2 cents worth, and I'll also tell you, we'll make sure that you run this by your broker. But hey, everyone wants you to be successful. And of course, you know, we do want you to sell our listings. You know, if you have to sell one of Dan's and one of Rick's listings your first year in your business, okay?
Will do.
Okay. You'll like it. You'll like it because it'll actually close. Hey, thanks for being here. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you, Rick and Danny, or Dan.
Danny's the man. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. And we'll see you out there. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. You are taking the right steps to get started on your real estate career, and we're proud of you. If you want to make sure you don't miss a single one of our videos, go ahead and subscribe to our channel right now. And if you want to show our instructors that you appreciate them, give them a virtual high five. Click that like button. If you want to join us for our Prep My Exam reviews that include all the tools you'll need to get started in real estate on the right foot, go ahead and click the link in the description, and we'll see you there.